but your television is on behind you.
please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I believe we're going to have a flag.
Yep.
Oh. Is there a flag somewhere? No? All right.
If you're on YouTube Live, you'll be able to see our flag.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just do it then. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next on the agenda is approval or revision of the agenda. I'll just ask if you could just raise your hand so we're not talking over each other. Is there a motion to approve the agenda for this evening? Carrie, is there a second? Kelly, thank you. Any discussion?
I do,
Yeah.
Marisa. I just have a question on what's planned. So I was kind of hoping we'd have an agenda item that gives us an update on where we're at and where we're going with distance learning. And I'm hoping that's under superintendent's report, but because I don't know that, is that what's planned for there?
I was planning to, yeah, just a brief update.
As long as we can have some discussion or update on that in that section, then I'm fine with it. Otherwise, I would request an agenda item to have a discussion on
Sure,
that.
that would be fine.
Why don't we keep it under superintendent's report, have discussion at that point? Any other discussion of the agenda? Do we have a first and a second? All those in favor, please state aye or raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Anyone opposed or abstain? Next on the agenda is public comment. Did we have anything for public comment, Sarah?
There's no thing on the YouTube Live chat.
Okay, thank you. Item 3.01, the 2020-21 proposed budget presentation. Mr. Furlong?
Yes, good evening, everybody. You should be able to see the budget presentation, and we're starting off with the cover slide.
We're not seeing that.
It's on
Bill, we're
YouTube.
not seeing your presentation?
It's on YouTube Live, or you can follow along to the attachment and board
The
docs.
attachment. Okay, the second slide, we want to, refer to the school district mission statement, and especially the last part that talks about fiscal capacity and responsibility. And really, that's been our guiding principle for many, many years in how we construct the budget. But we're looking at, making sure that we do have sound budgeting and business practice, and that we maintain a strong fiscal or financial position. On the third slide, I wanted to go over some of the bullet points related to the general overview of the budget. First and foremost, the preliminary budget maintains or enhances all existing programs for students. The preliminary budget for ongoing operations, and these are the operations that we've had year in and year out, reflects an overall increase of 2.02% and a resulting tax levy increase of 2.24%. However, new this year is that we have recently completed building projects, as you well know, at the high school, Enders Road, and Fayetteville Elementary. With those new building projects, there is new debt coming on, and those initial debt payments will be made this next fiscal year. So those debt payments alone are increasing the overall budget by 0.8%, and also increasing the tax levy by 1.09%. While the preliminary budget reflects a conservative approach, there is significant concern that the current pandemic will negatively impact state aid funding. The legislature has given the governor broad authority to adjust state expenditures mid-year, and even most recently, as yesterday and today, the governor has made comments about how there might not be enough revenue and may result in reductions to state aid to schools in New York State. As for the next slide, the revenue overview. Right now our state aid revenue is based on the enacted New York State budget. But as I mentioned before, the governor has great authority to make mid-year reductions based upon revenue shortfalls to New York State. The tax levy increase is currently at the limit as established under New York State law, and we'll get into detail as to what makes up that tax levy increase this year. And of course, all other sources of revenue have been reviewed and adjusted based upon what we've been receiving over the last few years. The next slide is the state aid comparison, and this is a budget-to-budget comparison. And you can see that one of our largest, or the largest state aid category is foundation aid. Initially, the governor had proposed about $250,000 increase in foundation aid for Fayetteville-Manlius Central Schools, but based upon current economics, the New York State legislature passed a budget that froze foundation aid at the current year level. So basically, we're going to get next year what we're currently receiving this year. The final New York State budget did allow the expense-driven aid categories, which include BOCES aid, high-cost aid, instructional materials aid, transportation aid, and building aid, to be based upon our actual costs in those areas during the current year or next year with regard to building aid. You can see the last line, the pandemic adjustment. That is a new aid category this year. And initially, the state has conveyed that the additional federal stimulus money that we were to receive, $170,000, would be deducted from our New York State aid. We still will get that $170,000 from the federal government. However, the state is going to have a dollar for dollar reduction in the aid that they pay us. In addition, we've increased that line by $500,000 in anticipation that the New York State will see a shortfall in revenue and will reduce our aid mid-year. The overall increase to state aid year to year is $245,000 approximately. The last time we presented the budget back in March, that was a $1.2 million increase. So we've lost almost $1 million on the state aid line. The next slide is relates to our tax levy limit. There's really three main components to make up our limit this year. First and foremost is the inflation index, the consumer price index. We are seeing a 1.81% increase in our tax levy due to inflation. The second factor is what's called the taxable growth factor, which indicates new brick and mortar construction within the district. That is approximately 0.43% this year, which is far less than what we've seen the last couple of years. I believe the last 3 years we've been over 1% and as high as 1.5%. So 0.43 has really indicated the slowdown in the growth in construction within our district. The third is the capital exclusion. And this is really based upon, what capital projects the school district or the voters have approved and what the local share of that is. So this is really, our new debt less any building aid that we're going to receive. And that difference is really the local share. And that's what's causing a 1% increase in our tax levy. The following slide, basically brings that all together. And if you add those three different factors together, you'll see that our overall tax levy increase for this next year is 3.33%. That resulting tax levy would be $65,592,550, which is an increase of $2.1 million. As a point of comparison, the 2019-2020 increase was 2.94%, and the year before was 3.67%. So we're pretty much in between the last 2 years. As indicated before, though, 1%, a little bit more than 1% of that overall increase is associated with the new building projects that were recently completed. Now, while the tax levy is increasing by 3.33%, because of growth in our tax base, we anticipate and conservatively estimate that the tax rate, the rate that actually people are actually paying on, will be less than 0.5% for next year. As you well know, the tax rate is not calculated until August, when we have taxable values and equalization rates. As for all other revenues, as with the expenditure side of the budget, we budget these very conservatively. It's a wide variety of different revenue sources and types that we receive. It is a fairly small portion of our overall budget. But once again, we base what we're going to receive on what we have received over the last several years. This is a listing of all other revenue categories. On the next slide, some of them have increased slightly. The big reduction is really in the area of interest income. You can see that we're going from $308,000 down to $113,000. That reflects the dramatic fall in interest rates over the last couple months. We were going to budget more this next year. I believe that the budget we presented last month was actually over $400,000 in interest income, and now we're down to $113,000. Overall, we are seeing a slight increase in all other revenue categories to a total of $66,000. One thing that I did want to talk about is appropriated fund balance. Technically, this is not a revenue source. Fund balance is basically your accumulated surplus that the district has. And right now we're showing a fund balance appropriation for next year of $840,000. The current year was $750,000, and that increase of $90,000 was basically due to an unanticipated pilot payment in lieu of tax payment that we received in 2019, 2020. So the next slide is the overall revenue summary. You can see that state aid represents a little bit less than 23% of our overall revenue. Meanwhile, the tax levy is the lion's share, almost 75%. And the two, the pie chart and graph that I've shown, really highlight that we do get vast majority of our revenues from the tax levy. And while the chart on the right, indicates a trend, it's very subtle on this because of the graph and how it's laid out. But you can see that over time, the state aid is really, if anything, gone down a little bit as a percentage of overall revenue. And meanwhile, the tax levy has increased. I think if we were to extend this chart back perhaps another 10 years, you would see a more dramatic change where state aid revenue has really gone down significantly as a percentage of our overall revenue, and therefore the tax levy has increased. So as we turn our attention to the expenditure side of the budget, the main cost drivers for our district Of course, the vast majority of our costs is tied to our workforce, our teachers and support staff and administrators. We're looking at contractual salary increases and benefit increases. About 75% of our overall budget is related to salary and benefits. We're looking at an overall increase in health insurance premiums of 6% for next year, whereas dental and vision premiums are increasing by a lower percentage. We are still seeing some significant increases in workers' compensation costs, and we continue to work on trying to reduce those as well. The last two bullets on this slide are the teachers' retirement system and employee retirement system. As members of both systems, we are charged an employer contribution rate. Those are on all salaries that we pay. Teachers' retirement system covers administrators, teachers, and teaching assistants, while the employee retirement system covers all other employees. And you can see in both cases that the employer contribution percentage is going up a little bit year to year. As mentioned before, debt payments has a significant increase in our budget. We're seeing a long-term debt expense increase of $578,000 year to year. In addition, we had to take out some short-term notes to help finance the projects at Wellwood. And that interest, or principal and interest, will be about $167,000 in the 2021 fiscal year. We also have debt related to school bus purchases, and that is increasing by $133,000. Since we are not operating like we normally operate, we are seeing some significant operational savings. We're seeing savings in the areas of substitute pay, perhaps coaching salaries due to the spring sports season. Diesel fuel, we're not operating our buses like we normally do, plus the cost of diesel fuel is down to just above $1 per gallon. Utilities, since we're not operating our buildings like we normally do, we are seeing savings on gas and electric, mainly electric. So far in the summer or the spring season, because of the sports being delayed, we're not seeing the costs associated with sports trips or field trips. While school is not in session, we are also not employing the school resource officers through the town of Manlius like we normally would. So we're seeing savings on that as well. And then the last two items, conferences, there are a lot of conferences that staff members go to this time of year related to professional development activities, and we're seeing those, obviously those conferences not being held. And last but not least, besides coaching salaries, there are some savings on athletics related to paying referees and umpires and other costs associated with athletics. Now, the one thing I wanted to note is because of these operational savings, we will be able to carry this money forward. We'll either be able to buy ahead for next year and offset, the reduction in revenue in 2021. For other savings this year, it will fall to fund balance, and that will allow us to perhaps utilize that money in the future as appropriated fund balance to offset any potential shortfalls in revenue. The next slide indicates the reductions that we have already made in the 2021 budget. That totals $500,000. And you can see the areas that we're looking at reducing this next year. This district has conducted a census each and every summer, and we are looking at not doing that this year. for a couple different reasons. First and foremost is the health and safety of our census takers. Sending them door to door this summer could be problematic. So we felt that this was an easy budget reduction. We are also looking at other areas, transportation, supplies and materials, summer custodial and maintenance staffing. We usually hire extra help during the summer, but we plan on not doing that this year. We're looking at reducing field trips next year, and also taking a hard look at how many bus aides we need for transportation during next year as well. There are certain expenses that we're looking at reducing in athletics and outside services. We're also taking a hard look, and we've noticed a couple of hosting services that we feel that we can do without this next year. There's also some instructional staff that we'll be reducing due to attrition. And we're also looking at trimming back on the arts and education budget. We typically underspend that budget anyways, so we figured this would be an easy budgetary savings to make. So the next slide is the potential budget reductions for 2021. The difficulty right now is we know that there's going to be reductions in what money the state is giving us this next year. We just do not know what that is or how much that is. So we basically decided to come up with a list of spending that we wouldn't budget for in the 2021 school year, but we would lock it away. We would not spend it. We would just kind of wait and see how the revenue side of the budget plays out. And then, if there was federal stimulus money that helped New York State fulfill what state aid revenue they've already promised us, then those items are budgeted and we can access those dollars in the future. However, if the state does have revenue shortfall and the state does make mid-year cuts to our revenue source or state aid, then we can forego making these purchases. And you'll notice that a lot of these items are discretionary in nature. They're things that we can choose to do or not to do. And there's also a couple items on this list that are just opportunities where we know we have perhaps some retirements or other situations where we can take advantage of not needing to spend money that's budgeted for 2021. Just going through the list, we do spend a considerable amount on outside services in the maintenance department. We do have quite a list of maintenance projects that we would have to pick and choose what we actually do and what actually will wait for another day. We have taken a look at some of the discretionary spending in the maintenance equipment area and have decided that some of those needs can be put off until the future. We do know of a couple of retirements that we don't plan on filling initially. And then we know that we're going to see some savings in utilities related to the ongoing energy performance contract work that's being done. If diesel fuel remains low, we know we're going to see some savings in that transportation line item as well. We had budgeted an additional $100,000 for school resource officers, or better said, school
Special patrol.
Special patrol officers. But at this time, we feel that while we'll keep that money in the budget, we will not hire those officers initially. We're also looking at across the board cuts in supplies and conferences, and we are looking at putting off into the future purchases of furniture and certain equipment. The last two items indicate some reductions in staffing, but once again, it's really related to either retirements or looking at where staffing may not be needed due to current enrollment needs. So that's pretty much what we're planning on doing. We feel that between the, amount that we're going to be able to save in the current year, along with the reductions that we made on the previous slide and the potential budget reductions, that we'll be able to absorb a significant reduction in our state aid for next year. If we look at the, three parts to our budget, the first part is our instructional program. And this first slide is pretty much everything that happens K-12 in instruction, except for certain items that we'll cover on the second slide. Most of the increases that we're seeing here are contractual in terms of salary increases. We do have some increases in equipment. And once again, these are the numbers that include that $1.1 million that we are budgeting but plan on not spending. Our overall increase in the K-12 instruction is a little bit more than $1 million. If we switch to the next slide, you'll see the rest of the instructional program. This is more by functional area. And you can see the second line, special education, is a fairly significant reduction. That reduction is really caused by a couple different things. First of all, the current year budget had significant savings in that because there were several students with special needs who moved out of the district prior to the start of the current school year. So those dollars were not needed. So that was an easy way to garner some budgetary savings. In addition, we feel that looking at our costs for next year, that they're going to further decline. But once again, the vast majority of that reduction is for students that actually moved out of the district over last summer. You'll see that our instructional media is increasing. The main reason for that increase is equipment in our instructional technology area. We continue to look at increasing that equipment line because we do need to replace equipment that's 3, 4, 5 years of age. You can see some of the other areas we've already made some reductions to the budget towards the bottom part, and that our overall total instructional program, including the previous slide and this slide, the overall increase is $870,000. The second part of the three-part budget is the administration. This is a breakdown of the different categories that we have in administration. You can see that several areas have been reduced in order to help balance our budget this year. The overall administration increase is a little bit more than $25,000. The last part of the three-part budget is the capital part of the budget. And we've actually broken this down once again into two categories, one being ongoing operations and the second being debt related to voter-approved building projects. This first slide, the ongoing operations, you can see once again that there have been some significant reductions to the budget in the area of operations and maintenance, some of which are in utilities, or most of which are in utilities, but some of which is in other outside services and other equipment categories as well. The overall reduction for ongoing operations is $284,000. One of the things that we do include in our capital part of the budget is what's called capital transfer. This is really a budgetary appropriation. We use that money on an annual basis to fund limited scope capital projects. As with the current year, we're looking at appropriating another $450,000 in next year. There's two purposes for that money. One is to repave as much of Pride Lane as possible. Pride Lane is deteriorating significantly, and we really need to, repave that and restore it to what it should be. As part of that, in order to make that work aidable or receive building aid on that, we will be doing a limited scope of work at the high school, and that will be related to security. In addition, we are looking at starting the carpet replacement at Enders Road Elementary, which will include some asbestos abatement. And basically, that'll be the two main uses of that $450,000 for this upcoming school year. We do plan on doing the Pride Lane repaving this summer, if possible. And the replacement of carpeting probably will not occur until the following summer due to the asbestos abatement work that needs to be done. As for the other part of the capital plan or capital part of the budget, this is related to the voter approved building projects. And added a couple pictures here of the Enders Road 4 classroom addition and also the high school library media center renovation. You can see that our long-term debt is increasing by $578,000, and in addition, we're seeing short-term interest and principal of $167,000. Please note that we are going to be receiving building aid, and you noted that we did receive an increase in the building aid line that was pretty significant, and that is really building aid related to those building projects as well. Our overall building aid ratio is 75%. So, once again, 75% of the cost of these projects is being paid for by New York State. The last part to talk about on the expenditure side of the budget is employee benefits. You can see that we have the different line items of the employee benefits part of the budget here. The most significant increase of which is the health, dental, and vision insurance. Once again, health insurance premiums are going up about 6%. So we're seeing a $940,000 increase on that line. The other categories are fairly consistent with inflation. The overall increase in the total employee benefit line is a little bit more than $1 million. So the expenditure summary, and this is just once again a recap of the screens you've previously seen. The ongoing operations increase is a little bit more than 2%, 2.02%. But when we add in the impact of the new debt related to those construction projects, the overall budget is increasing by 2.82%. Besides the general fund budget approval, there will be another proposition related to the school bus purchase. We are looking at purchasing 5 replacement school buses this next year, 4 of which are 71 passenger full-size buses, and then we have 1 35 passenger shorter bus. The total cost is $681,000, which is just slightly above what the total cost was of buses purchased in the current year. We do get 72.5% aid back on the purchase of those buses. We receive that over a 5-year period. So therefore, when we purchase these buses, we will spread the cost over 5 years as well. If you look at the annual cost of those 5 buses, you're looking at $38,000 a year. And that $38,000 will not hit until the 21-22 school year. So there is no financial impact of those school bus purchases in this next year. So the overall budget summary, the 2021 budget, once again, maintains or enhances all programs for students. I think that's especially important to note given the reductions that we did make in the budget, and we tried to keep the vast majority of those reductions outside the instructional realm and more on the support staff or non-instructional areas. Recently completed building projects, as I've mentioned several times, does have a significant increase in both the budget and the tax levy. And we are concerned about the uncertainty over state aid. But we feel that, keeping certain monies in the budget, but not spending them initially to wait and see how state aid revenue plays out is the prudent way of approaching this year's budget. The fourth bullet, we do plan on making certain budget reductions, but we do not believe that they will have impact on any programs that we offer for students next year. And once again, the overall budget is increasing by 2.82%, with a related tax levy increase of 3.3%. But we conservatively estimate that the actual tax rate increase will be less than 0.5% this next year. Are there any questions from the Board of Education about the proposed budget for 2021?
I do. This is Dan. Can you just talk through for a minute for me? You had referenced from the operational savings that we're seeing now because of the shutdown of carrying those forward into fund balance for next year. I thought we were already just about at the 4% max that we can carry over. So how much can we really practically carry over and in what fund?
Well, we do have fund balance. Total fund balance is made up of different parts. The 4% that you're referring to is the undesignated fund balance. And we are close to that limit. The Board of Education has authorized the use of a teacher's retirement system reserve, which we currently have no money in that reserve. We would be able to put in a maximum of about $650,000 into that reserve. We probably have room in other reserves. I know that the district has not carried a liability reserve, but that's something we may want to take a hard look at, establishing that reserve going forward. There are also other reserves that we feel we will probably need to increase. Unemployment is one of those. We are starting to see some unemployment claims coming in for different employees, whether they're substitutes or coaches that have filed for unemployment. So we feel that there's certain areas or certain reserves that we can increase that our auditors will be fine with. The other aspect of this is, not all of the savings will need to be put into reserves going forward. We can encumber, which is kind of a fund accounting term, we can encumber certain expenditures and basically roll them from one year to the next. Typically that happens with items. If we were to buy computer equipment with current year funding, leftover equipment money, we would then encumber those monies and roll them over from one year to the next. So it's really a combination of the two. One is, buying ahead to help offset some of the reductions like in instructional supplies and equipment for next year.
Yeah, chime in. My question is, when I look at the cuts that we're making for next year, I guess my question is, to what extent are any of these things viewed as more permanent and structural? Or are these cuts looked as a temporary measure exclusively? What guidance can you provide about that? Because one of the things that you had mentioned, Bill, in the finance committee meeting of last week is that pandemic offset, which I know I'm saying the same thing twice, but I had to think through it a few times. But essentially, it was what one hand giveth, the other taketh away, I think, was the way you would put it in the finance committee meeting, where federal money came in, but then there was a dollar for dollar offset among the states. With a second round of money being discussed now as a federal bailout package, I remember you talking about there being some provisions within any additional funding from the federal government being delivered in such a manner that that could not happen, and that what was intended to go to localities must go to localities.
Yeah,
So I guess my questions are twofold. One is, to what extent are the 500,000 or the 1.2 million, those two sort of tranches of budget cuts, to what extent are those viewed as permanent? Or, by contrast, if not, if money might show up from a next federal stimulus package, in what order might those items that have been cut be replaced, and how soon?
You know, once the voters approve the budget for next year, that is the maximum amount of money we can spend. Okay. That being said, you know, a budget is really just a snapshot in time. So, you know, if, you know, I'm really referring to that one slide that says reductions included in the 2021 budget. Those monies would be taken out of the budget. Okay, they wouldn't be there. So even if we did receive, you know, the full amount or more than what we budgeted, we perhaps might not be able to pay for those items this next year because they're just not in the budget, unless we were to make decisions that something else would not be purchased or not be spent upon, and then we would put these, you know, back in the budget. As for, you know, how permanent are these? You know, these are things that, you know, we look at budgeting on a year-by-year basis. So if we were looking at reducing field trips this next year, there's nothing to say that in the following school year that we couldn't add back to field trips. That, you know, we might say, okay, you know, the revenue situation has leveled off. You know, we can look at adding any of these back in the future. Even mid-year, once again, if we decided that one of these items was, you know, perhaps a higher priority that needs to be restored mid-year, and something else would be, you know, not spent upon to be able to pay for that, then we would do that. But I'm not sure I'm answering your question with regard to how permanent these are.
Bill, could you, Bill, just to make clear, just for Tim's sake, and maybe this is already aware, but the slide doesn't show it this way. I know you went through it line by line, but just to be clear, those aren't eliminations of those things. Those are reductions in each of those. So field trips is a reduction of, I think we talked about 20% or something like that. So I just want to make sure you didn't think that there was no field trips next year. And as Bill said, that could come back the next year to full throttle, or it could be reduced more if the next year is a problem. In terms of, I just want to speak quickly to the instructional staffing question, that one of those is a reduction because we just don't need the position any longer. And the other one is a slight reduction from a full-time position because we believe we can, in the department we're talking about, we believe we can spread the kids out and not have a major impact because the department's so large on class sizes. It would affect class sizes by maybe 1, 2 students. So it was a way to reduce but not eliminate the position. Whether those come back the following year depends on enrollment. I'll mute again.
So can you talk about what happens if this does not pass? If the voters just don't do it and we're on contingency budget territory, what does that all look like?
To the tax or the revenue side, or the revenue summary slide. The one with the pie chart.
Mhm.
Oh, it's down. It's down. So you see the tax levy. Actually, you got to go up to the tax levy. There's one more slide. One more up. Keep going. One more. There. So you see in the first bullet of the tax levy limit continued slide, there's an increase of $2,112,405. If this budget was defeated twice, or if we had to go to contingency, we would lose that entire amount. So we would need to further reduce the budget by $2.1 million in order to balance the budget.
That's just an exercise in go find the money, go find a way to trim it out of there.
Well, it would be, we've already taken a very hard look at the expenditure side of the budget. And, as the items that we are planning on reducing the budget, and then also those potential reductions, those are some significant lists of, expenditures that we're looking at trimming. This 2.1 million would be on top of that. And I think would have a definite impact upon the programs that we do offer at Fayetteville-Manlius.
And when you go back to, there was a slide you were just on with athletics, you were talking about that being, and Jeff, your point's well taken, it's reduction, it's not elimination of any of those sorts of things.
Correct.
With athletics being a big, broad word, are we looking at not offering all of the sports at all of the levels that are offered this past year?
No, I believe we're going to be offering all the sports at all the levels. There's no loss of teams or anything of that nature. It's basically, trimming back on discretionary spending, trimming back on supplies, equipment, uniforms, things of that nature.
Right alongside the section.
I had a similar question about arts and education. I know it sounded like you underspend in that category, but we just saw that glorious presentation on the arts in our district, and I'm just wondering if that would be particularly painful, or if it's going to be painful.
No, and that's a relatively, once again, this was something that was discussed, at the district office, administrator level, being that we have been underspending in that line item, by about $15,000 a year. We felt that that was a relatively easy budgetary savings item that we could list.
Bill, may I just jump in there? That Rebecca, that's related to field trips as well. So a lot of our arts and ed money is used to offset ticket prices for if the kids go to the civic center, that sort of thing. So that would go hand in hand with a reduction in field trips.
Got it. And my second question, in the potential budget reductions category for supplies, furniture and equipment, I'm just wondering, we're just gonna wait and see what kind of spending we can do, or kind of how will we approach that from the beginning of the year?
Yeah, what we're looking at is supplies. Vast majority of items in the transportation area, we wouldn't want to impact the maintenance and safety of our school buses. That being said, we will have some significant savings in the current year, and the plan right now is for what we reduce next year's budget by, that we actually utilize current year funds to make building level supplies or instructional supplies whole year to year. So in other words, using some of the savings this year to supplant that 20% that we're reducing next year. Does that make sense?
So as of now, some of those supplies would be instructional supplies.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay.
But once again, the 20% that we'd be reducing next year, we'd be actually spending that money this year. So, each building would have 100% of the money. It would just be made up of 80% from next year, 20% of this year.
Okay.
Conferences, we're also looking at an across the board 20% reduction with no out-of-state travel.
And that includes, I would recommend the Board of Education as well, that everybody.
Right.
And administrative, board, and faculty.
There's there.
So this is Dan. I just have a question on possibilities, you know, the dark possibilities. I don't envy you because putting a budget they're going to be giving is really a near impossibility. In the governor's update today, he threw out the number of a 20% reduction in school funding, absent federal aid. So if we're projecting 20 million of state aid knocked down by 20%, that's $4 million. Now, I'm hoping that's the high end of his, and maybe our worst case scenario is closer to a 10% mark, maybe. But right now you've got, if I understand it correctly, $500,000 built in that pandemic reduction, and another identified potential 1-1. If we actually see a 10 or 10+% reduction, is there room in this budget for another $500,000 of on the fly cuts that we have to find? And where would that?
Yeah, the difficulty really is, like you mentioned before, the uncertainty of how much will they reduce our aid. You know, when the governor talks about a 20% reduction, is it a 20% reduction of foundation aid, which in our case would be a little bit less than $2 million? Or is it a 20% reduction in overall aid, which would be $4 million, as you pointed out? The interesting aspect of that is if they cut building aid, that would actually make our tax levy limit go way up. So I don't think the state would do that. The other aspect of that is when they talk about a 20% reduction, you know, while a 20% reduction on overall aid in Fayetteville-Manlius is $4 million, when you look at poorer districts, the relatively poorer districts, you know, like Syracuse City, they might get 80–85% of their revenue from state aid. So if they'd be losing 20% of their number, it would be, you know, just, I don't know how they would be able to operate. So while you say 20% of aid, you don't know how that's going to be divvied up when it comes to individual school districts. When the gap elimination adjustment was put in, wealthier districts saw a more significant loss of state aid than poorer districts. Okay, now statewide, we're right on the average. You know, people might feel that we're a wealthy district, but you know, compared to the statewide average, we're almost right on it. We're just a hair above it. But once again, you know, when the governor talks about 20%, you know, is he talking about just foundation aid? Is he talking about overall aid? Is it across the board or not? And it's hard to speculate on that. In regards to your question, Dan, about, you know, how much more could be absorbed in this budget, you know, I think that, you know, we could absorb another $1.1 million because of this list that we've already put together. You know, anything above that, you know, if we were to lose $2 million or $4 million, we would have to go back and take a real hard look at our expenditures and see what else we would need to reduce.
Bill, is it fair though to say that we have been compiling a list that's closer to 3, correct?
That is correct, but that $3 million list includes, you know, includes carryover from what we plan on saving.
Are we able?
And it also includes a list that we might, be looking at that we felt we didn't need to go to right now. We do feel that this is a multi-year problem. This is not going to be a one-year fix. The gap elimination adjustment took 7 years to recover.
Other questions?
There are no additional questions. I can't see everyone with this view, but I'm not hearing that anyone has any questions.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Just, I'm more curious than anything else. During the preliminary budget presentation, Bill, you had mentioned that you were hopeful that you could negotiate down dental and vision a little bit. I know we already went through the numbers there, but did you have any success there?
We're still
getting any wiggle there?
We're still working on the dental. We have not finalized that yet. As you probably understand, there's been a lot of people we deal with are not necessarily working from their office; they're working from home. It's made communication a little bit more uneven or not as smooth as we have had in the past. We're still working at reducing the dental. The vision, I think we're safe to say that's going to be right at zero and no increase. The overall vision cost to the district is fairly low. The lion's share of the cost is really on the health insurance part of the number. But we will continue to work with dental to see if we can get that down a little bit.
All right, thank you.
Sherry?
I just want to chime in a thank you, because I know you've had to redo your whole budget over the past month, and you have this all put together and very well explained. So thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it too.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bill. So we are now moving on to item 3.02, which is the President's Report. I did send an email to the board letting you know that it's time to begin our superintendent's year-end evaluation process. So the evaluation materials are uploaded into the evaluation website. If you have any problems accessing that or any questions, please let me know. Board guidelines, have not forgotten that, but I just thought that in our current situation, we need to be focusing on our budget and our distance learning. So that is an item that we have not put on the agenda for the last couple of meetings, but that's because of the current situation that we're in. I think many of you have probably seen some of the celebrations that other districts have put forth for their seniors, the yard signs, the banners on the down Main Street, etc. I thought those all looked really like some nice ways to sort of boost the morale of our seniors, but being far removed from high school, I thought I'd ask our expert, Maddie, to chime in as part of her report in a few minutes about how our seniors are doing and how, if anything, they might like, what, if anything, they might like in terms of something along those lines. I know Dr. Tice has also spoken or is going to speak to Dr. Kilmer about that, just to see if there's something that we as a district will be able to do for our seniors at this point. That's all I have for my report. Item 3.03, Superintendent's Report, Dr. Tice.
Certainly, thank you. I'll try to go through the items and then, as Dan indicated, open it up towards the end for a discussion. Under internal operations, I'd certainly like to thank the Board of Ed for working remotely here, whether it's been these meetings or Finance Committee or Facilities Committee. It certainly helped our budget development process and the capital improvement projects going forward. Speaking of capital improvement, the asbestos abatement related to the EPC at Eagle Hill and the high school is wrapping up. And soon we will do the switchover with an inspection with National Grid to separate the Fayetteville Elementary electric from the Wellwood Middle School electric. And last, under internal operations, just before the board meeting, I know the auditor from the comptroller's office had a chance to speak to Bill already. I set up a time when I will speak to her tomorrow morning, and that she will be reaching out to all of you by phone call after our meeting in the morning. So just to give you a heads up, I know I've referred to it in the backup information as well. Under community relations, I'd certainly like to thank our Capital Region BOCES communications team, Nancy and Christine, for providing daily updates to the community. They've been flying out fast and furious, not Nancy and Christine, but the updates, certainly as the governor's executive orders come out left and right. Under administration, I'd like to thank the administrative team for working through the issues pertaining to running a school. With the end of the third marking period on Friday, there's been a number of discussions in that area, distribution of the Chromebooks, but they're also looking ahead, whether it's special events or ceremonial celebrations that may need to be rescheduled depending on how far the school closure period extends into the spring. And finally, under administration, I'd like to thank the administrators and our teacher leaders, faculty members, for securing the return of deposits for our students or travel vouchers for trips that were unfortunately canceled because of the pandemic. Under non-instructional business operations, I cannot say enough. I know this extension of the school closure period, we've only been a month into it. But needless to say, I know, like all of you, it feels like an eternity. But I would like to applaud the efforts of our non-instructional workers who have labored to keep our essential functions running through this period. Our food service workers now working in split teams to try to hedge our bets. Gosh forbid there was a COVID infection that would shut down that. It's been very successful in terms of our meal program that we've opened up to all students, and I want to thank them for their efforts. We have to report it daily to Onondaga County. I'd like to thank our transportation department employees who deliver these meals, and our instructional technology team who not only maintain our online platform, but also are working with our transportation department as we are no longer doing on-site distribution of the Chromebooks, but delivering them to the homes. So we're trying to help out. Our help desk has done a wonderful job. In fact, early on, it was dealing with some faculty questions, but most recently, it's been our auxiliary faculty, the parents and guardians have been calling in for help, and our help desk has been all too happy to help out. And then last but not least, to our buildings and grounds crew members, custodial and maintenance for disinfecting the buildings and providing a deep cleaning. They've been up here to the district office as well. Their collective efforts are certainly worthy of this recognition. In fact, our buildings and grounds crew also put signage around campus for the different athletic venues, as well as our playgrounds and track and all the fields that may be used by groups. We're trying to deter the public gatherings and to encourage what the Onondaga County Executive has been working towards as far as social distancing. In the area of pupil personnel services, pleased to report that Lisa Deneen and her team are moving forward with plans to hold CSE meetings as we go forward. Mr. Gordon has been working, in fact, held a meeting today to prepare for online registration. We know we have a lot of parents of young children, kindergartners, ready to enroll, and certainly have been thwarted by the pandemic. So we want to be able to open an online registration program that will allow that to go forward. Under the area of students, I'd like to thank our students and our faculty members who have transitioned to the online learning platform. I know it's been a challenge in the past month in both synchronous and asynchronous formats. They've helped to move seamlessly through Schoology, even though it's been down a few times early on. I think as a lot of districts avail themselves of that learning management system, but I know people have stuck with it. Certainly Schoology has improved their infrastructure going forward, and I want to also thank everybody from students to teachers to administrators for working through the planned vacation period, just to provide all of the children with the consistency and predictability. It's to be commended in terms of having to make those switches on the fly. And then last but not least, under instruction, certainly as we discussed at the last meeting, Dr. Kaufman and her team, teacher leaders, instructional technology are exploring different summer review options. We're looking at online platforms. BOCES, in fact, for summer school is looking at both on-site and on-learning opportunities for their regional summer school program, because we do not know how long the closure will extend, whether it's through the summer or whether it will affect the fall. It's really up in the air right now. Last but not least is that conversation. I know we're only a month into it, and certainly, like I said, it seems like an eternity. We are breaking new ground. As you know, we signed a memorandum of agreement thanks to Mr. Gordon's work, and trying to just turn the teachers loose. Some are certainly experts in this area, others are just learning as they go ahead with it, and we knew that was going to happen. But even the state pulled back on all the APPR. They wanted people the freedom to move forward, and I think that's important. And I've been very pleased with the efforts that our instructional team and faculty have done over the course of the last month. That being said, I know we will debrief with the faculty in terms of the effectiveness of the program, if there's any additional things that we would need. What if this model's extended through the summer? Are we looking at review camps, so to speak, rather than summer school? Would it be optional? How many students would be involved going forward? What would we need to do if this somehow was extended into the autumn, as some pundits are talking about? Would it be a hybrid model? What are the things that we're going to have to do if it's a split schedule? So those conversations are just starting, and certainly will be part of the conversation as we go forward. Just looking at, this, we knew it wasn't going to be optimal. We knew not having the children in their classrooms with their faculty members was not optimal. But that being said, what are the things we can do in terms of looking into a mirror as far as student engagement, continuity of instruction? Are there some things that can be done in terms of synchronous instruction that we're doing asynchronously, assignments, exams going forward? This has been a learning opportunity for all of us. So like I said, I just wanted to thank everybody. I know I did a similar report about a month ago when we were just starting, and certainly the efforts by all over the course of the last month have been worth note. So that is my report. Are there any questions, or do you would like to engage in a conversation?
Dr. Tice, so like with AP classes, there's, you have to cover certain items for the exam. But I'm wondering about the rigor as far as the other instruction. Some of the classes, there's an exam, and the curriculum is, not tailored exactly to the exam, but what has to be covered. But with the rest of our curriculum, I know we have the curriculum maps that are across the district, and maybe it's too early to talk about this, but especially if we're going to go into next fall with this, how do you think how do you think we'll be able to transfer the rigor that we are so familiar with in FM and the personalized learning to this online world? Like, are those discussions, is that part of your discussion process?
We meet as an administrative cabinet every week by teleconferencing. Those conversations include a debriefing right at the beginning kind of where have we been, looking in the rearview mirror, what are the things we have to do going forward. I don't know if Dr. Coughlin, you'd like to add anything in there? She's part of those discussions as well in terms of working with her teacher leaders.
Sure. So I'm kind of looking at this in phases, and I would say our first phase was when we closed to begin with, and we had just a very short period of time, and the focus during that period of time was getting the technology in the hands of kids, getting all the technology platforms in place, making sure we were establishing communication with families, within our departments, within our grade levels, and all those structures. And really the connections with kids and making sure that we were really just online and making those really important connections with kids, and that they had the tools to do that. So now we're, I'd say, in this second phase right now where, and I would also say during that first time, we were really in a more of a review mode. Now that when we were extended longer, we are now moving to more curriculum advancement. And so what does that mean? We're really looking at each of our courses and each of our grade levels and what's essential. What are those essential standards? What does the delivery look like now that we're much more secure with the technology? What does that delivery look like? Having teachers look at how they are making the connections, how they're giving students feedback, how we're consistent across the district is really important. And then when we're making those curricular changes, making sure that we're documenting that so that when we return, or however it looks that we return, we are then prepared to realign and adjust our curriculum to meet the kids. You know, if we're out for the rest of the year, how are we prepared and ready to meet the kids where they are in the fall? So I'd say that's where we are right now. And the teachers are having that be as rigorous as possible, again, with keeping kids engaged and trying new modalities and you know, whether that's having meeting Google Meets or whatever that looks like, or sharing videos with kids. But mixing up the modalities is really important. I would also say during this time, we have gotten ourselves as the instructional staff repositioned and with all of our regular meetings and our communication. So department meetings, grade level meetings, high school instructional forum, principals meetings, and those are now more secure and in place. So we have the ongoing communication and that planning and collaboration, which quite honestly, that was really difficult the first couple of weeks and getting ourselves situated. So Marisa, to your question, then I'd say we're now really thinking about phase 3, and that is, okay, if we're closed now for the rest of the year, how do we position ourselves? What does summer look like? How are we preparing ourselves for the fall? How are we making sure that, to the extent possible, that we're going to be filling in those gaps with kids? And all of this is with the overarching belief and communication that we've had with the teachers, and that is that student connection and support for kids, because kids are going through a lot at home right now, and we understand that. And some kids are, you know, they're just fine. They can work. They have all the tools. And other kids, it's a real struggle. So we're trying to find a balance. But planning for summer school is, or what summer options we might be able to offer to kids this summer. I'm meeting with a couple of vendors tomorrow with our instructional technology team to see what's available. Grading has been something that's a big discussion. We're continuing that. Lots of different ideas about grading and final averages. We're also in this next phase thinking about all those school end opportunities for kids, the concerts, graduation, all of those pieces, and what that means for kids and how we're dealing with that. So I kind of see it in three phases. But when we do return, I mean, we're trying to make it as rigorous as possible right now. But when we do return, we would fully expect to have that FM rigor be there, but also supporting kids where they come through the door in September or whenever we come back. Kind of a long answer.
No, very, very good answer. Thank you very much, Mary. Other questions? Tim?
Yeah, on that same topic, and I'm not looking for an answer to this at all, but I just hope that it's part of the conversation you're having. You said that one of the year-end considerations you're having is, with respect to grades, with respect to final average, you had mentioned. And this is anecdotal, but when I was teaching, the final average was a product of 4 quarters plus a Regents exam. And very often for a lot of kids, that Regents exam proved to be an opportunity to boost an overall final average, in some cases by a lot. They tend to do pretty well and be pretty well prepared for that exam. So in many courses, that's not even going to be a published test. So I hope part of the conversation among you folks who do this professionally is a discussion of, will there be perhaps a local exam? Maybe that's a poor idea. I am not advocating for a local exam. I'm advocating for a conversation about the absence of what may have been a boost available to a lot of kids. How might that be addressed? What are some pros and cons of handling it in different ways?
That's definitely part of the conversation, with the overarching premise of fairness to kids and giving kids every opportunity to do well and not penalize kids. So yeah, good point.
I'm hearing, most of the parents I know are at the elementary level. And one thing that I do hear from some folks is that there's a kind of, it's variable how much teachers are doing Google Meet or, seeing their kids in person or doing instructional videos. And so I know some parents are looking for more in terms of engaging their kids, that some kids really need to see their teacher's face through a video, or to see kids in the classroom through a little bit of social time. And I was wondering if there's sort of any guidelines on that from the district. It does seem to vary a lot from teacher to teacher, and of course there should be discretion based on teaching styles and comfort, but I think there's some teachers that are doing almost none of it. And I think at least at that grade level, that is something that does help keep kids motivated.
We don't have any stated guidelines about that, Rebecca, but I know that as time has gone on and again, the tools are in hand, that the teachers are more comfortable with that, and that is increasing. Also, what's happening a lot is, or not a lot, but very definitely K-8, what happened last week were grade level team meetings where the teachers are sharing ideas about how to best have that happen. I talked to one of the principals earlier today, all the those meetings that are happening, the principal's gonna pop in to those Google Meets and just say hello to the kids. So I'd say those are on the increase. We can't make them mandatory, but I would say that teachers are very definitely seeing and understanding how valuable those are.
And then I guess a related part I was thinking about is there any thought, just because it's so hard to elicit feedback, I mean, they're teaching to classrooms that they can't see or necessarily get feedback from, depending on how engaged the parents or how old the kids are. Is there any thought, if this is likely a longer term play for us, that we want to get some community feedback from parents about how things are going or how engaged their kids are. Again, depending for the students themselves, but just to see how it's going for everybody in the FM community.
My thought about that is, not yet.
Yeah,
Sure. I would, if we were to do something like that, it would be way too soon to do anything like that. I think, again, the teachers are really, it seems like a long time, but it's been a short time, and they're really just getting their sea legs, and I wouldn't think that would be a fair thing to do to them right now. I would say though, and they are soliciting feedback from their classes, and possibly that's something they could do with their parents in their classroom and engage where the kids are, although many of them would probably be able to, may know that, but so maybe by class to begin with. I don't know, Dr. Tice, if you have any thoughts about that.
And I didn't mean feedback of the teachers specifically. I meant more globally, like how the systems are working for families.
And that's where I was gonna go. You're always welcome, and we've got to encourage that. And maybe as I look at Christine here, that can be the focus of our next article, and we can push it out through social media. We still encourage those conversations between parents and teachers. In fact, we would love, I know the teachers would love to have parents reach out to them via email or by phone. We can have those at an organic level, at a grassroots level. I think for even the state, that's why they backed off on all the APPR. They knew that for some teachers, and rest assured, we have some teachers doing quite a bit with the technology because they're comfortable with that. I mean, in terms of their experience, whether it's math or science, we've had a lot of positives there. And there's some teachers that this is all new to them. And there's been a considerable amount of growth over the last month. Well, one of the reasons the state backed off of the APPR was to encourage that continuous learning and the growth. So I'm firmly behind the debriefing for the staff to talk about what things they're doing. We've asked that already between a grade level or a department, but at the same time, parents should always feel free to reach out to their child's teacher for that conversation. I know they reach out to the help desk to get the technical support now, but I would encourage that connection with the individual teacher as well.
Okay, Dan's had his hand up for a while.
Well, just kind of two different things. One is on the last question about engagement. We obviously have a very involved community in terms of our parents and the education of our kids, which has always been a great thing and an asset in this community. And I do think it would be valuable, even at this point, to solicit on a little bit wider scale, even in terms of just a very simple survey of how does our community think these systems are working, the processes are working, not evaluating the teachers individually, but the system and getting feedback. And I think that's really important for two reasons. One is because you might get some helpful feedback as you go forward with planning toward, Dr. Falcon, what you call phase 3 of this. But also, to Bill's presentation earlier, we've got big budget issues ahead, and we've got a budget vote coming ahead. And the more our community feels engaged in the process and that their voice is being solicited and their voice is being heard, I think people feel better about what they're contributing to and hopefully what they're voting for. So I think there's a budget vote piece of that as well. My other question is I think it's great that the work has started on what you call phase 3 summer and next year. But when this first started, it was a month, and then it got extended, and I don't think any of us need a crystal ball to know that the greatest likelihood is we're not coming back to school this year. We don't know that, but I think most of us know that's the greatest likelihood. So we've got to good amount of time left in this year. And as Rebecca alluded to before, there's tremendous variance among what is happening, not just at each building level, but teacher to teacher. And I know a ton of our faculty is doing a great job and should be commended on that. But I do wonder, as we're now into phase 2 and knowing that we've got a solid month and a half, if not 2 months of this left, is there any talk about going towards some semblance of regular synchronous learning, even if it's twice a week, not every day of the week, of some semblance? There are a lot of kids who have had no interaction or minimal interaction online with their teachers. They're getting an assignment online, they're filling in forms, they're typing stuff, they're hitting send or submit, and they're done. And I'm not sold in the ones who are doing it that way. And again, it's not everybody, but it is a subset of our students where I'm not sure that they're really beyond the maintenance and review component and into moving forward with curriculum. And my sense, my feel is that an increase in the amount of synchronous learning, again, not all day, 5 days a week, but even if it's every other day or twice a week, that there would be a benefit to our students, both academically and socially, in having that. So I don't know where I'm just curious, Dr. Kaufman or Dr. Tice, either one, has there been any discussion about moving us toward a little bit more of that, at least as we go forward the rest of this school year?
For this current year, I mean, we've been debriefing and taking a look at what things have worked well and what has not worked well. In terms of long-range planning, I mean, again, we're a month into it right now. I mean, I totally agree. I'd love to have the professional development in place to help move forward, but just as everyone is sequestered, these teachers are sequestered as well in terms of professional development opportunities. So I think we have to think about that first before expecting them to be able to embrace the technology at a level that certain community members are more comfortable with than they might be, for example. Mary, anything that I left out, or?
I would just say, no, we haven't talked about that. I would say one major hurdle there is kids' access to devices. So we have in many and I think most families, kids sharing devices. So that becomes a little bit of a hurdle. So one child might be working on the computer at 9 in the morning, and the other is at 1 in the afternoon. So that's, the devices are a little bit of an issue with that. But to answer your question, Dan, no, we have not talked about regular synchronous learning.
So just a quick follow-up to that. I guess I'm a little bit surprised to hear that, because at our last meeting, I had asked, does everybody yet have devices? Have we heard, do we have any students who either do not have devices or do not have internet access? And what we were told was that the district was not aware of anybody who had no access, and that Chromebooks had been made available and that we had more than had been picked up. So has something changed with that, or where do we stand with that?
No, so to clarify, I think we have 2 families that we were dealing with that didn't have internet accessibility, and we were figuring that out. In terms of the devices, we have distributed all the devices that have been requested. That's still, though, not one-to-one district-wide.
But at the time you
We have
asked,
more. Do we have capacity to provide more?
We have additional.
I'd have to check
Chromebooks.
with Josh Becker and Laurel to know if we had the capacity to have lent out a device one-to-one. I don't know that way. I know we've lent out, we're probably 450, 500 now.
Dr. Coughlin or Dr. Tice. So I'm aware that the state is requiring, or my understanding, the state is requiring districts to keep sort of some form of accountability log, for lack of a better word, where we show that we have had contact with students so that we know that, you know, all that we can show that the students are participating. There are no students who have been lost in the process, that they are engaged somehow, that there has been some outreach to students. So do we do any regular phone calls to students, or how are we making sure that all of our kids are accounted for? Like, are we doing attendance? Is that through Google somehow that you're doing attendance? How are we keeping track of our students? And then as part of that, we probably had students who were identified as being in maybe some challenging situations at home or other issues. How are we tracking and monitoring those situations for students?
So we are not taking attendance per se, but teachers are keeping track of all of the students and making sure that they're engaged and getting feedback from all their students. If that's not happening, and there have been some students, the teachers are reaching out to the counselors to help with that. Our homeschool liaisons are helping with that, and the administrative team is helping with that. So in the form of phone calls, emails, etc. But that has been a big focus, is making sure that we are connecting with all of those kids.
And that goes back to Dan's earlier point. When he asked earlier, I shared that and asked this question to the entire team. And at that time, we were not aware of any connectivity issues. So that's what I reported back to the board. Now, it was through those follow-up phone calls, whether it's been by the teacher, the counselor, or the administrator, because of lack of activity, that we come to find out there were a couple of students that were having difficulty connecting. So a month ago, we were spot on with that, and that's why we discovered through those phone calls home. And some we've inundated with emails and getting no email response. We're trying to do the phone calls as well, and we're not getting the phone call response. Well, we are keeping that log, as President Mims suggested. We are trying to reach out, especially where there is inactivity.
I have a question to follow up on Dan's point. So I understand synchronous learning might be an issue at present, but what did come up in the conversation was families sharing devices. We might not have the capacity immediately to provide one-on-one devices for every student who needs it, but do we have the capacity to hand out more devices so that if there's a family with multiple children, they're not, one kid from 9 to 1 and another one from 1 to 5. We don't have Chromebooks sitting in storage, right?
Yeah, we have some additional. I don't know if it's enough for 1-to-1.
Even if it can't be 1-for-1, though, I mean, it would seem better to have them out to the extent possible for the remaining month and a half of school. My thought.
We definitely have more available that can be loaned out. So yes, we do. I didn't want to, so that would be a consideration of synchronous learning, a scheduled synchronous learning. Another consideration is we've heard from many families about their schedules and when they might be able to be supporting their children. And each family has many different circumstances. And so, you know, if we were to say the algebra class is going to meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 9 o'clock, that might not work for all of the kids in the class. That's why we designed the idea of the teacher office hours. But we can, I mean, as this goes on and as this is evolving and we are growing with this, we need to be considering other possibilities.
I will just add one, oh, sorry. I was just gonna add one more piece that I'm seeing 3 different classrooms being managed, and there's one classroom that's doing WE videos. So there's 3 or 4 videos that are about 4 or 5 minutes each of instruction. And just seeing the teacher's face and the presentation of the material is just really engaging. And so again, I understand technology, we have all ends of the spectrum, but if there are, it looks like a trial is being used, but even that versus a voiceover of material where there's a couple videos that are voiceover being read by the teacher, which is, you know, it's like slides, and that's also really great. I just think there's that piece, you know, aside from synchronous learning, if that's challenging, even some of that video instruction just connects kids and motivates them.
Kids want to see their teacher.
Yeah.
So I just want to just share a real quick story. So what I don't want to do as we look at next phases to talk about the possibility of, which I hope there's talk about a possibility of doing a higher level of synchronous learning, is the staff that we have is tremendously capable, even if they've not done this before, and nobody's done this before. They're very capable, and I won't go into names, but one of our most senior faculty members, the first week of this, that teacher was unable to successfully send an email to the teacher's students, couldn't quite even figure out email, and now is doing more online classes tremendously well than many of the other teachers at the same grade level. So even those that are not used to technology, they're investing the time on their own and through the resources that you're providing and figuring it out quite well. Which I guess is why my concern is that there are some who just are not. And that's why I personally would like to see a little bit more of a push or a nudge forward to increase the amount of connectivity, not just for academic reasons, but social reasons as well. And there are a number of teachers who are doing phenomenal things. I mean, most of them are, but there are some that have been very quiet and not online, not engaged online with the students. And I hope as we move into this next phase that we can encourage a little bit better use of the technology from those teachers.
One of the things you'll hear from me, and I've been pushing Dr. Coughlin and the IT department and the teacher leaders, is to take a look at some different programs for the online summer camp or whatever we decide to call it, so it's not confused with summer school. Because I agree with you, part of it too is you don't know what you don't know. And I think providing the appropriate tools, as they used to tell me in industrial arts, the right tool for the right job, until we try out some of these other software solutions that are out there that can help facilitate this, I think will be a key. So I'm really looking forward to hearing back what the team investigates, and we're trying to take a look at the pricing so that it fits into our budget. But I really am excited about the possibilities of that summer camp, review camp, whatever we want to call it, and trying out some platforms that would help to expedite some of the things we've all talked about this evening.
Other feedback?
Just the one concern I have on it, or question that I have on it, both on number of devices as we talked about, but also other possible learning platforms is the $1 million question of where does that fall in the budget that we just looked at? Is there funding for that? It's one thing to look at it, but is it there?
Well, we'll have to kick the tires and just see what we can, because as Dr. Coughlin would tell you, some of them didn't return calls right away because they've been inundated, probably with a number of other districts asking for the same information. So it'll be interesting to see what the pricing structure looks like of some of those solutions.
Other thoughts, comments from the board?
It was a good conversation. Thank you.
Next on the agenda, item 3.04, committee reports. So audit has not met since our last meeting, correct? Okay. Community relations has not met. Facilities has met, correct?
We had a short, yes, we had a short facilities meeting. The minutes are there, and that was really just focused on the changes that were happening daily, if not twice a day, by Empire State Development. That we're good to go on Wellwood, and the decisions were made, and things are going to move forward with Wellwood. The really important thing that we did talk about was it's really important to communicate clearly with the community, so that when they see that construction is happening there, that they understand it's essential and allowed and proper, and we're not getting all kinds of calls reporting people going into work. That's in essence what the focus of our meeting was.
And we did hit with a couple. We did hit with a couple of articles right away. In fact, one press release was picked up by local SYR Channel 9 and featured for Wellwood. So that was good by the committee. We're trying to get out ahead of it.
Rebecca, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on one of the notes in the minutes on the modular classrooms possibly being delayed. And so if so, how could that delay our project?
So thank you. I kind of forgot about that, but I don't have it in front of me. Dr. Tyser, Bill, I don't know if you have an update on this, but one of the things that we did talk about was the modulars were supposed to be getting manufactured in Pennsylvania, and Erica was going to be, I thought, looking into whether they could be manufactured either at a different Genius site or a site in New York. And I know that the Department of State approval was tied to the particular plant, but I don't know if there was any further research or feedback that was given to us on that, because at least as of the date of that meeting, construction was shut down on them.
Correct. And our feedback is tomorrow afternoon. So I will be able to let the board know or put it in this week's Thursday letter. But yeah, we've got a meeting with the Genius folks by teleconference tomorrow afternoon.
Okay.
Right
now, do they know?
Oh yeah, right now they're in. I'm sorry.
Does Genius know that this project, at least in terms of in New York, has been determined an essential project?
Yes, they do. In fact, their ambitious schedule said that we've been out a month, they're delayed a month. Well, we don't know if that's day to day. So when we're out 2 months, does that mean we're delayed 2 months? So right now, instead of delivery in June, they're looking at a July delivery date was the preliminary. So we want to, that's why we set up the meeting for tomorrow, to be able to talk about everything with respect to the modulars. I appreciate their ambitious schedule, and who knows, maybe with the shutdown, they've lost other business so that they're able to throw, multiple shift work on it, around the clock. I have no idea, but their intent is to try to give us delivery by July, which would allow us to set it up in August and be ready. But, I'm a doubting Thomas. I want to see it before, I appreciate their ambitious schedule. I just don't know if they'll be able to meet it. So that's the reason for the meeting tomorrow, is to just find out what's going on. Good questions.
Okay, thank you. Well, Finance Committee met and you pretty much got the report a few minutes ago. Anything you wanted to add to that, Mark?
No, the only other thought was that, Bill mentioned that, sans any new information that comes up within the next couple of days, we really need to press forward on getting this budget passed. And then just see where things lie in the future.
Okay, thank you. Policy has not met yet, since our last meeting. I don't know, Eleanor, did you see the last edition of the NISBA bulletin? There was an article in there about different policies the board might want to look at in planning for future events like this, or has there been any discussion about whether or not our policies, the current ones we have, are fine based on the changes that the state has made?
I did not look at that bulletin in its entirety. I do know that Sarah and I have been in communication with and Craig in terms of trying to get a meeting set up. So I think once we get that meeting set up, we can work on looking at the agenda and how we can develop that agenda so that we have the most efficient use of time.
Thank you. Has the foundation had a Zoom meeting? No, okay. I'm looking for Sherry. Seems like Sherry's gone. There's Dan down there. Okay. Legislative liaisons, any report for this meeting? I know Dr. Tice, you had a virtual meeting with Congressman Katko's office.
Congressman Katko, yes. I explained that we appreciated the federal support from before, but that it had been short-stopped in Albany and didn't get out to the individual districts. And he said that certainly the feds were all aware of that and looking at what could be done going forward to make sure that it reaches healthcare, schools, and so forth.
Okay, thank you. And I saw that we hadn't updated the third letter about the Hall of Distinction. Did you want to add anything to that, Dan?
No, I haven't been involved, but Craig, have all four of them been notified that we're gonna move this to next school year?
Just if, with your approval, I didn't hear any feedback, Sarah included the 4 honorees, so hearing no objections, we would like to reschedule to the fall. Nobody called me, so I'm assuming everybody was understanding, and I feel bad. I would have liked to have done it this spring, but they need to be able to make their travel arrangements, and I think if we can push it off to the fall, it would be a great thing.
Just on that, because it was planned to be tied to awards night, which it wouldn't be if it was in the fall. I don't know where the discussion is with Dr. Kilmer on what contingency plans would even look like for awards night.
There has been
just
some
because they're
initial
tied together
conversations, and we're going to talk about it at Cabinet on Wednesday, but I don't think it would be good to do it at that time for reasons that I'll explain later. The contingency plan for awards night would be a busy function at the end of June, if you know what I'm talking about.
Daryl, did you have a comment, or did you just you lit up like you're about to speak?
No, I just hit my phone.
Okay.
Because just one quick thing, Dr. Tice, if we are going to look at the fall for Hall of Distinction, then it would probably seem to make sense to look at homecoming weekend.
Possibly, that's certainly an option that I think would have a strong possibility. But we're just going to have to see the availability, hopefully, of the 4 honorees and being able to coordinate that. But yeah, homecoming did cross our mind.
Okay, thank you. Last but not least, Maddie. Where's Maddie? There's Maddie.
Yeah.
So nice to see you, Maddie.
You guys too. lately, our class officers and I have been making posts for our seniors on our Instagram, and we told them to submit either the college they're planning going to, any gap years or work programs that they were intending to take after senior year, just so that we could kind of honor them in our own way, because we just wanted to tell them that we know that it's a tough time right now, but all the hard work that they've put in through their high school careers hasn't gone unnoticed. And we have been Zooming with Dr. Kilmer a few times to talk about alternate options for big events such as graduation and fall. And earlier with President Mintz, we were considering yard signs or the banners through the town. And I haven't had time to get too much info from other people in the grade about that, but I'll definitely look into seeing what that they would be interested in.
I know the FM Education Foundation plans to do the lawn signs again this year, although I haven't seen it on the website yet. I don't know if Sherry or Dan have heard anything at this point, but I know they intend to redo the fundraiser.
So it is planned, and I did get an email actually from Seth earlier today about it. They're just having some internal discussions about possible ways to expand it or do it slightly differently. And I know Dr. Kilmer and Mr. O'Brien both reached out to Seth in the last 2 days to continue that conversation. So I absolutely expect something to come. So there will be signs. Just what it actually looks like in terms of format this year is still being figured out.
And the Lions Club is doing a generous donation for a sign in front of the high school as well. So that's very exciting and very nice of them to honor the graduates.
I know the signs are a fundraiser, and I know they're not very expensive, relatively speaking, but if we could just make sure that every senior somehow figure out a way that even regardless of cost, if they're not able to have that expense in their family. I know a lot of changes are going on in a lot of families right now financially, that we'll be able to make sure that every senior has an opportunity to get one of those signs. Figure out some way to work with our community to make that happen. I wouldn't want any kid to be left out this year.
That is part of the discussion that's happening.
Great, thank you. Anything else, Maddie? How are your online classes going?
For me, I'm doing well with online classes. It's definitely, it took me a few days to get used to all of it, but they're pretty easy to follow, and I'm getting my work done.
Well, thank you very much for coming, and we really appreciate seeing you. Anyone have any other questions? Okay. All right, so moving on to, where am I here? Oh, item 4.01, adoption of the 2021 budget. Is there a motion that the Board of Education hereby adopt the 2020-2021 budget as presented in the amount of $88,298,298 on April 20th, 2020? Is there a motion to do so? Thank you, Dan. Second from Rebecca. Any further discussion of the budget? Okay, thank you again, Bill, and Dr. Tice and everyone at the DO for your work under very trying circumstances. All those in favor, please state aye, raising your hand. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is adoption of the 2020-2021 property tax report card. Is there a motion the Board of Education hereby adopt the 2020-2021 property tax report card as presented on April 20th, 2020? I'm sorry, 2020. Oh my God. Yes. Motion from Sherry, second from Mark. Any discussion? All those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstain? Okay. Next on the agenda, item 4.03, personnel actions. Is there a motion that the Fayetteville-Manlius Board of Education approve the following personnel actions as recommended by the superintendent? Thank you, Daryl. Second from Dan. All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay. Item 4.04, approval of the corrective action plan. Is there a motion that the Board of Education of Fayetteville-Manlius approve? Sorry, I'm wrong. Approve the, I'm sorry, is there a motion that the Fayetteville-Manlius Board of Education hereby approve the internal audit corrective action plan? Thank you, Mark. Second from Kelly. Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. Aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Policies in second reading, item 4.05. Is there a motion that the Board of Education approve the following policies in second reading? 5560 revised, 6121 revised, 5571 rescinding, and 7440 new. Thank you, Kelly. Second from Tim. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. 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 Anyone opposed or abstaining? Next on the agenda, item 4.06, Health and Welfare Services Contract. Is there a motion that the Board of Education authorize the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District? Is there a motion that the Fayetteville-Manlius School District authorize the superintendent to sign the contract for health and welfare services provided by the United City School District for the 2019-20 school year? Thank you, Dan. Second from Sherry. Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate aye, raising your hand. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Item 4.07, resolution for the OCM BOCES ballot for election. Is there a motion that the Fayetteville-Manlius Board of Education adopt the resolution casting its vote or vote in the annual election of members of the Board of Cooperative Education Services for the person or persons indicated on the ballot? Thank you, Kelly. Second from Daryl. Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate aye, raising your hand. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay. Item 4.08. Is there a motion that the Fayetteville-Manlius Board of Education adopt the 2020-2021 OCM BOCES administrative budget as presented in the amount of $8,643,392? Thank you, Mark. Second from Kelly. Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? All right, board development. Let's see there. Working agenda items. Sorry, my iPad's going a little slow for some reason. I don't see anything under working agenda items. Potential consideration for future meetings. Just note that we are scheduled to have our superintendent evaluation discussion at that Tuesday, May meeting. Likely will be held in some form of an online session. Need to remember.
Marisa?
Yep.
Sorry, with respect to the superintendent evaluation, I know there are other platforms that are more secure than Zoom. I just hope that at some point we can have a discussion, or if you could look into with our tech department, what is really the best platform that we should be using. I am really not convinced that it should be Zoom with regard to confidential conversation about evaluation.
Right, and we switched our staff over to a different platform, and the Board of Education is going to be following suit. Sarah, our board clerk, is really taking the lead on that, working with Josh. So my understanding is probably going to be our last. So we will have a different platform moving forward because of the different security issues. Thank you for pointing that out, Ellen.
Marisa, do you know what it will be, the new platform yet?
I believe they're looking at Google Hangouts. Is that correct, exercise? Did I get that right?
Google Meet.
Google Meet.
Yeah.
Google Meet?
Yes, it's the same, Google Hangouts.
All of the staff is using Google Meet. Hangout is another word for it. It's transitioning from Hangout to Meet.
How about the Teams app that's out there?
Microsoft Teams?
Yeah. It is a Microsoft product, yeah.
I'm not familiar with that. Is that something that we are looking at, Dr. Tice? Is something that our platform or
we
computers
haven't.
would support? I don't know.
We can investigate, but yeah, we haven't at this point.
Okay, let's look at it, see what's, most secure. And I guess that's relatively speaking, because as soon as something's secure, someone finds a way to make it unsecure, but we'll have to do the best we can. Definitely good, worth having a look-see at the Microsoft team meetings, I believe it's called.
Marisa, just real quick, on the dates and upcoming agenda items, is there, I know we talked about this a little bit before, but is there a timeline within which we would be having a further discussion about summer school or summer camp, whatever the words, whatever this is? Obviously, we don't have a lot of meetings left in this academic year. So what is the timeline for the network we would actually be having a next discussion and possible decisions on that?
Decisions as far as whether or not we would have it, or is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, I was really more asking for Dr. Tice or Dr. Kaufman,
okay.
what their timeline is, so we know when we would be discussing it, so that people in the community who want to know more about this have some actual time to deal with it.
Yeah, we'll report back, as you heard Dr. Kaufman say, that she is conducting some meetings tomorrow. So we can report back either through a letter, much like Mr. Gordon or Mr. Furlong does with updates. We could put it in the Thursday letter. We'll definitely report back out at the public meetings that are scheduled for May and June. So I'll continuously keep it as part of my superintendent report.
Is there a deadline when you would have to have that decision made, or that you would like to have it by, so that to Dan's point, people can plan? I know there's a lot involved in that. You get teachers who would be, able to participate, et cetera, if you were able to do that.
Yeah, we're
so
trying.
What is your time to do it?
Yeah, we're trying to move as quickly as possible. I mean, the office pool was that the good governor had another 2-week delay in them, and that in all likelihood, as Mr. Seidberg pointed out, after that 2-week delay to May 15th, they'll probably go to the end of the year. And I think once that announcement is made and we know we're not going to have an opportunity to be back with the students again, I think we've got to be ready to hit the street with our plan for that summer review camp. Because it is optional. Parents, to call it a summer school, a credit recovery implies they're going to have to be there, through the entire summer. The summer camp platform may allow for a more personalized approach to work it around existing schedules with their families. So we want to be able to hit quickly with this, but we have to find out availability and cost. And so we'll try to get an answer as soon as possible.
So you're looking, then you said, so May 15th is the latest we would be able to know. So that's the May 17th board meeting? Or
right now, the board is scheduled to meet May 11th, and then it says May 19th, which is the old budget vote.
Sorry, I got my dates wrong.
So technically, on May 19th, you do not have to meet. We could schedule it for another night. That is the old budget vote. Depending on when the governor sets the June vote, and we've heard rumors, it's supposed to be June 1st at the earliest. So it may be that week, it may be June 9th. if they try to fit in another vote, we're still going to have to do our annual hearing prior to that. So we will have to schedule what it'll look like for our calendar, a special board meeting, but it will be a required annual meeting before the actual budget vote. So finger counting the 7 days backwards. 7 to 14. Yeah, 7 to 14 days backwards from whatever they settle on. The governor's got to make an announcement sooner or later on that. But to go to your point, yes, it'll probably be mid-May that we'll try to make that happen.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, so I believe I am moving on to item 7.0, the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented? Thank you, Dan. Second from Daryl. All those in favor, please raise your hand, indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Okay. Next on the agenda is the adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Mark. Is there a second? Thank you, Kelly. Any discussion?
Well, I just want to ask, Jeff is obviously on the call from his recording studio there. So Jeff, do we get anything before we leave?
Not a chance, Dan, sorry. I need a more secure platform before I do that.
Oh, petty fest this year. Come on, you little something here. All right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please indicate aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? All right. Thank you all very much. For people who have not done this before, I think we're doing this pretty relatively well. Thank you very much to Sarah for all your behind the scenes work and our tech people and the district office staff. This is the SF family. We are pulling together and we are making this work. So
And
much
thank
appreciated.
you. And thank you to the board. And
You guys have a good night. Stay well.
thank you.
Thank
All right,
you.
bye-bye.
Bye.